Welcome to another Third Apron Salarycast. I'm Yossi Goslin, NBA salary cap analyst, and this is another mock-off season where I do some hypothetical trades, mainly for fun, but also to show how teams can accomplish certain goals within the cap rules. And this one is on the Detroit Pistons. I already covered them extensively on the podcast. I had Bryce Simon on to discuss their offseason, and I also went over their salary cap dynamics deeply on the Third Apron newsletter. I put the link on the description. Check them out so you could get a little more context on what I'm about to talk about. So the Pistons are entering somewhat of a pivotal season in terms of roster building. They have a ton of cap flexibility right now this year and next year, and they have all their picks now going forward. And they also have several young talented players. So they could make a big swing for a star if they'd like. I think they're probably going to wait a little bit. As discussed on the podcast, they might want to play things out, just bring back everyone, just to kind of confirm that what they did last year is that they are that as talented as their record suggested. And if okay, then maybe by the trade deadline, they can go and be aggressive, go after a second star to pair with Cade. But at the same time, they have some big decisions coming up with some of their young players, mainly Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren. Both are extension eligible this summer and can sign extensions up until the start of the regular season. Otherwise, they will be restricted free agents next summer. So they need to decide who they want to invest in, how much they want to pay, and decide if they want to play things out into the season instead, if they're still unsure on some of these guys. Or they could potentially trade them if they don't want to move forward with them. So I'm going to show some extension possibilities for them a little later, because that's going to play into the contract projections for all these moves that I'm going to do. So I'm also going to show some projections for their top free agents. Dennis Schroeder, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., Paul Reed. So there's a couple ways that their offseason can go. Right now, they're projected to have about $17 million in cap space. But in order to access that cap space, they would have to renounce the free agent rights to all of these players. And 17 million is not a lot for cap space nowadays. They're actually there's probably a stronger case for them not to have cap space, that way they can resign all these free agents and then they'd have access to the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. At 14.1 million, that's almost as much as their cap space projection. So when I do all these moves, I'm going to have them operate over the cap. I just think it makes more sense. And they could still bring in free agents via sign and trade, which I will get into a little later. So I'm going to have projections for all of their free agents coming back. And one other thing to note is that whatever I do, I'm going to make sure the Pistons don't exceed the luxury tax line both this season and the next. I don't expect them to pay the tax this year. And they have a lot of tax space right now, about $53 million below the $107.9 million threshold. That is a lot of flexibility for them to bring back all their guys and then later make some big trades that significantly increase their payroll. So first I'm going to start with free agents, and I'm going to go over Dennis Schroeder. Just finished his 2-year mid-level exception deal that he signed with the Raptors, and the Pistons are going to have his early bird rights, so they're not going to have any limitations to resigning him. Technically, they can get his number all the way up to like 18, 19 million for the first year. However, I don't anticipate he's going to have a market that high. I think he's, for the most part, pretty properly paid around that mid-level money. I don't know if there's going to be the full mid-level available to him this summer. So I could see him coming back at roughly like 12 million a year. So here's a structure I put out 2 for 24, but I have it declining. So it's going to start out a little higher at 12.5 million, goes down to 11.5 million. And the main reason I want to do declining structures is because the Pistons, again, $53 million in tax space, that's a lot. It's going to be hard for them to really spend that full amount just by re-signing their free agents and then using them mid-level. So I'm going to have them start a little higher because why not have some savings in the future years? Same thing with Tim Hardaway Jr. I have him on a 2-year, $20 million deal. Personally, I don't even think his market's going to be that high where teams are going to be offering him 10, 11 million a year. But what the Pistons are getting is they bring him back on 1 year, and then I have him taking a team option on the second year, and it declines as well. So the Pistons get a little more optionality and a little more cap flexibility in case they do keep him next year. If Hardaway were to agree to something like this, he would have veto rights in any trade this season because technically this is a 1-year deal. So in order to protect his bird rights, he would have veto rights in a trade. Now, this situation is a little interesting. So Malik Beasley had an outstanding shooting season, and he's definitely going to get a substantial raise off that $6 million salary he had last year. However, the Pistons are a little limited in terms of what they can offer him with his rights. They only have his non-bird rights, which means he can only get 120% raise off that $6 million salary. So the most they could give him would be $7.2 million. So if he were to accept that, meaning that his market's really low and teams are lowballing him, then what he could do is take a 1+1. He takes that 7.2 million, gets a player option on the second year, and then he can hit free agency the following year, and then he'd have early bird rights, and the Pistons can re-sign him to something a little more his actual value. But I would anticipate that his market will probably be higher than this. How much higher? I don't know. I have a hard time seeing any player getting the full mid-level, like any role player getting the full mid-level this offseason, just based on how little tax flexibility teams have league-wide. So I could see him getting slightly above that $7.2 million amount. And the Pistons can match that if they dig into their mid-level exception. So that's what I'm anticipating will happen if they want to bring him back. They'll have to go a little higher than his non-bird. So they use a portion of their mid-level exception to bring him back. And I have him at this deal. Think of it kind of like what Buddy Hield signed with the Warriors last year. Same percentage of the cap, a little bit higher, roughly 3 for $30 million. And I made it non-guaranteed with a team option on the third year. The big theme about these deals I'm doing for the Pistons is just keeping them short. 2-year deals. Just with these players, I think it's just safer to keep things on the short end and give yourself a little bit more flexibility in the future. And then last, Paul Reed. You probably didn't expect to hear him or even see him get a contract quite like this, but the Pistons do have his early bird rights. They can give him a contract well above the minimum, and I have them giving him a 2-year, $10 million deal that descends. Mostly non-guaranteed. First year, let's say it's like half guaranteed. Second year, fully non-guaranteed. Why? Because they have the flexibility, they have the money to spend. Why not have another guy, another salary, it's not a super big, but like a decent sized salary that you could potentially trade later. So that's a big part of what's going on with a lot of these contracts I'm giving out, is that the Pistons want to build out having several players that are on nice size salaries, but their deals aren't too long and there's like some protections on them. So they could consolidate some of these guys later in a potential trade. And here's the roster I've got put together so far. I've got Cade Cunningham. He's starting his max contract. I've got Dennis Schroeder, Tim Hardaway, Malik Beasley, and Paul Reed back on those contracts that I projected. And after all their moves, they're about $13.6 million below the luxury tax. Plenty of space now below the tax to significantly increase their payroll with some imbalanced trades. Now, before we get into any trades, I just want to quickly look at the Pistons draft pick situation. Pretty clean situation now that the pick that they're trading to the Wolves is finally about to convey. They originally traded it back in 2020 to the Rockets as a future pick with rolling protections every year. It was like mostly lottery protected. And now that they made the playoffs, they are finally sending that pick over, and that opens up more trade possibilities with their future picks. Because since it was lottery protected for like another few years, maybe another 2-3 years, it just kind of complicates how many picks they can trade in the future. So now they can trade up to 4 if they want to. I don't think they'll need to be that aggressive, but theoretically, they can now trade a maximum of 4 first-round picks in the even-numbered years. So let's get to the trade, and first I'm going to go over the big one, Jaren Jackson Jr. He was a suggestion by Bryce on the podcast as one of the players that he identifies as one of the better pairs you can put next to Cade, and I really like the theory of it. Now, a couple things. Most likely, Jaren's not going to be available. The Grizzlies are in a position to renegotiate and extend this contract long-term, but just for the fun of it, he has 1 year left on his deal. Let's say he doesn't want to continue with the Grizzlies. He's got some agency, and if he's interested in the Pistons, he could definitely get there in a trade. And I do think the Pistons have enough value with their combination of young players and tradable draft picks to make an acceptable offer. So I came up with this Jaden Ivey, Ron Holland, mainly to get the salary matching, but also some very interesting young players and 2 future picks a little bit later, not too late, but a little on the later end, so the Grizzlies can potentially get something more valuable, since in the short term, if they were to send out 26, 27, might not be super valuable. Now, like with all my fake trades, I'm just showing what is required from the Pistons value-wise, and also in the terms of the salary matching component. This could become a bigger deal where some of these players maybe, or picks, don't go to the Grizzlies, and then the Grizzlies get something else that makes a little more sense to them. Jaren would not be able to renegotiate his contract in conjunction with the trade, so he'd have to remain at that $23.4 million salary. And that makes it easier for a team like the Pistons to acquire him, because all they need to do is send out get within $8.5 million of his salary, and Ivy and Holland, they make it. And it's worth noting that Jaren is on the last year of his contract. If he hits unrestricted free agency, he's probably going to get max offers. So whoever trades for him, if he is on the market, they're probably going to have that baked in. And so all the moves I did position the Pistons to be able to fit that in. And then here's my second trade, also a suggestion on the podcast. Naz Reid, and he has been linked to the Pistons, and they could use another big with stretchability, especially if they don't get a guy like Jaren. Naz Reid's a little more realistic. So the Pistons, like I mentioned, they can't use cap space. They probably wouldn't be able to use the full mid-level. That wouldn't be enough to match what other offers for him might be and what the Wolves can extend him to. So they're going to have to resort to a sign and trade to get him properly paid, but also try to beat other teams' offers for him. And the way I looked at it is, if you're bringing in Naz Reid and you're going to have to pay him a good amount of money, plus you got Jalen Duren who's about to get paid, and you potentially bring in another big like Jaren, it's not going to be realistic to have both Isaiah Stewart and Naz Reid making as much money as they are coming off the bench. So I have them sending out Isaiah Stewart. I feel like if they bring in Naz Reid, that's the most likely outcome. They send out Isaiah Stewart, and the same trade exception rule applies. They only need to, whatever they want to start Naz's salary at, it would be their outgoing salary plus $8.5 million. So they can get Naz's salary all the way up to $23.5 million. And if they want, they can, from there, give him like a 4-year, I believe, $100 million deal. But I am gonna instead have his salary flat at this amount going forward. That would be 4 for 94. That still beats the market for him and helps with the Pistons payroll, especially now that I've got them bringing in Jaren, who is going to command a max contract. And like I mentioned with the Jaren trade, this is just showing what I think would be required from the Pistons, and Isaiah Stewart doesn't necessarily have to go to the Wolves, could go to a third team. And here's the final roster I put together for the upcoming season. I've got Naz Reid in for Isaiah Stewart. I've got Jaren Jackson Jr. in for Jaden Ivey and Ron Holland. And they finish just below the luxury tax line while being able to field a 14-man roster. And then before I show next season's payroll, I need to make a projection for Jalen Duren's extension, since he's going to be factored in. You can check the offseason preview I wrote on the Substack about what Jaden Ivey's can look like, but since I already traded him, I'm not going to go over it. So with Duren, I'm still not totally sure what his extension could end up as, but when you're looking at some comparable centers, like recently you got Nick Claxton getting about $25 million a year. Jared Allen is now going to make about like $30 million a year. With the way the starting center market is starting to rise, I'm kind of starting to get a framework there of what an extension for Duren could look like. So I've just pegged them in at $27 million a year. That's in between guys like Claxton and Allen, roughly 13% of the salary cap. And I feel like this is kind of on the higher end of outcomes for Duren. So I could see this start going for 135, starts as low as $23 million and goes up to $30.7 million. And this could end up being a very nice sub-maximum level contract if Duren pans out to become an above-average starting center, maybe even makes an all-star team once in a while, or at least get some all-star buzz, then this would be a pretty great value contract. And here's their payroll for next season. Was I able to get them below the tax? Yes and no, but first let's go over it. I've got Jackson in on his 30% max salary. That would start at $51 million. I've got Naz Reid still making this $23.5 million amount. I've got Duren making this $23 million amount. I've got Schroeder, Malik Beasley, Paul Reed, and Tim Hardaway Jr. on their second-year salaries, and some draft pick projections for the following season. They'll have their first, they'll have their 2026 second. And when you put it all together, they're able to fill up the roster at 14 players. They're just above the luxury tax line, so they didn't finish above that projected amount, but they still have that team option of Tim Hardaway. They've got the non-guaranteed salary of Paul Reed. They can cut those guys, and as a way to get below the tax, they could also restructure Tim Hardaway's contract, maybe get him back at a lower amount while remaining just as deep. And by then, you're hoping that Asar Thompson has taken some big steps because Tobias Harris isn't here. He will be their top unrestricted free agent in 2026. If they go out and get a max level guy like Jaren and do an aggressive sign and trade for a guy who makes a lot of money like Naz Reid, and you extend Jalen Duren on top of that, they're just not going to be able to keep Tobias. So that is my Pistons mock off season. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed doing this one. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd like to know what you guys think about the value, but also if there's any other All-Stars you would like to see the Pistons pursue in the near future. I feel like with Cade, you can fit just about anybody with him. Make sure you're following me on Twitter, Blue Sky. My name is UFC Gazan. I'll be reacting to all the transactions with instant salary cap analysis. Make sure you subscribe to Third Apron wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the newsletter on Substack. And we are still having some spots available for the sports business classroom program in Summer League in Las Vegas. Check the link in the description below for some more information.